Zoom and for this guy here.
By the way, Frank, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but you've muted your microphone.
Sorry, I do that on purpose because I've got a dog, and every time the neighbor comes and goes, he goes nuts. So I'll unmute when it's my time to speak.
Cool. Just in case you didn't notice.
Good Zoom practices. All right, here we go. Hello, welcome again to Friendology. Today is Monday, the 26th of April. We have with us Jonathan, Roger, Joshua, Frank. We're still missing our dear Chris, and soon we're going to introduce a new member to our cast, and that's our dear friend Rob. Our discussion today is revolving around discovering our path in life. Hope you enjoy as we talk about our meanderings, our discoveries, our lessons learned along the way, and how it all integrates into friendship amongst men. Welcome. Well, friends, welcome again. It's so exciting. I know even in the preamble here, we're all so excited to catch up with each other. Roger was giving warm chocolate internet kisses to all around. But it's a wonderful thing to enjoy friendship this way. So it's glad to see all of you. Let's do a brief check-in quickly around the table here, around the internet table, so to speak. Let me start off with Jonathan. Jonathan, give us a recap over the last couple of weeks. How have you been doing? Anything noteworthy to share with us?
Been crazy. I've been very, very, very busy at work, doing about 10, 11-hour days, gigantic workloads. So that has taken up a lot of my energy and has meant that I've been spending a lot of time resting on this couch and other couches in my living space here. So, but it's been very good. It's been really good to just go nuts for a little bit, just for a season, right? It's like that whole make hay while the sun is shining kind of attitude. So yeah, that's where I've been at. But mentally, really good. Physically, working at it.
Okay. I love the backdrop behind you as well. It looks so peaceful, and it reminds me of how you intentionally try to take out those times for yourself to rest.
Yeah. And lately it has had to be more time for myself. So yeah. So that also means that I haven't been reaching out to as many people and not connecting as well as I have in the past. So apologize for anybody if anybody's offended by that. So
we have royally judged you already. Just kidding, brother. We love you. Joshua, let me go to you.
Sure, things are great. Just hoping that this vaccine that I got some 3 hours ago doesn't hurt my arm too much, but just enjoying time with kids, with friends. Everything's good. Everything's wonderful, I would say, overall. Feeling good physically, so that's good. Yeah, nothing much to say.
As an extrovert, I'm guessing your social cup is still full. Is that right?
Yeah, it always needs filling. It's never full. This is the thing. As an extrovert, to my level, it's never full. It always needs some more.
It needs to be filled up.
If I get it full, then I just get a bigger cup, and I just need to fill it even more. So no, it's not full.
Just don't hug it all. Don't hug it all. Roger, brother, go on.
Oh, my only two highlights are, I got the vaccine too. So I'm scrambling to see when I get the second one so I can get it all out the way. And then the other thing that was a highlight. And the other thing that was a highlight was I spontaneously had guests over for dinner. You guys know who they are. We won't name them on the podcast show. Y'all know them. But I cooked, and I cooked more than I thought I had was going to cook, and then I looked around and I had so much food. So 3 friends came over and helped me eat up my food and took care packs home. And I'm gonna do the same for you guys. Soon, I'm gonna cook. And when it's safe and good, you guys are gonna come over and eat and take food home. Yeah, because I found out I can cook.
That's
I have a
brilliant.
secret for you, Roger. I can eat.
What a happy amalgamation. That's awesome. Roger, that's awesome. I still have yet to claim that I possess that gift, so I'll be looking to you.
Yeah, you live close by. You do it all the time. Just pop by. There'll be food when you want to.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Frank, brother.
Yeah, it's been all right. I've kind of continued that process of initiating some self-work and self-care in terms of exercise, trying to stay focused on keeping my finances in order. Work's not been super busy, but I know it will get busy. And yeah, I guess I'm getting my vaccine soon as well, so we're all going to be hopefully all immunized up and everything pretty soon here. But yeah, I can't, I've kind of been, kind of sticking close to home, and got a couple people in kind of close by in the neighborhood that kind of live alone. So I see them. But yeah, mostly just been hanging out with the family.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
On my end, I've been working a lot these last 2 weeks, as some of you will know, because you haven't seen me as often as I would like for you to have. So I've been working a lot. Business has been also super slow, and so that kind of wears on me. It often wears on me. So just watching carefully again those changing dynamics. Additionally, today was a bit of a whirlwind. I was into the garage this morning because my vehicle all of a sudden sort of lost power, and so I took it in without any idea what was going on. I took it to just a second party garage. They tried to do diagnostics on it, and they discovered, oh, actually, we can't do anything for you because this is a special code only by the manufacturer or the car maker. So I had to go into that dealership. It turned out to be, thankfully, just something that was easily fixable, or not easily fixable. It was just a code that they need to clear based on some recall that they'd done. And so they reset that for me. And so half of the day gone there, and it's like, So I continue to struggle with factors beyond my control, trying to remind myself what I can control and how I'm going to respond to it. So that's been a present challenge, even as I have thought of you guys and how much I miss your company as well. So that season in life, but nonetheless, I'm glad to be here. Those cures are far from me because I'm thrilled to see you guys again. Today, we are talking about discovering our path in life. And I have a feeling for all of us here, it is so different, so different. The part I really want to explore and get into is what once was, how it transitioned, especially, with factors, again, beyond our control, and where we're kind of seeing it go, hopefully, as we continue to grow in our intuition, which we talked about once upon a time, our insights, our lessons that we're learning as we go along. So that's what I had in mind for our discussion today. So let me open it up. I will open up just from my frame of reference, saying once upon a time, I was idealistic. Such huge ideals of what could be.
I don't think that's changed, has it?
I think it's been tempered, Jonathan. That's a good question.
Oh, okay.
It's been tempered. When I was young, it was limitless. I had lofty ideals. When you're graduating from high school, and they usually have in the yearbook the most successful person, the most rich person, like we're just throwing out projections, and so that was once upon a time, and I imagine if my graduating class were to get together again. It seems we don't do the 10-year incremental reunions anymore. But were we to do so, it would be really interesting to go back and look at those projections of what we were planning once upon a time and the kind of course that life took us on. And so, yeah, that's what I would find extremely fascinating. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm coming from in reference to, wow, once upon a time, I had some big designs and plans. I was going to, I don't think I knew what I wanted to do at that time. And I think a lot of the things that I struggled with at that time drove my plans. And so at the top of them as a codependent was, I'm going to please mom and dad by getting a good degree and a good job. And then I'll be able to sort of coast through and do what I'd like to do. But wow, it's just shifted along the way. Tell me from your guys' perspective, how many of you guys set up plans early on in life that you still find yourself on that same trajectory? Anyone here? No, eh?
No, God, no.
I should probably turn off my mute if I want to talk here. I will say something about, as you're talking, what comes to my mind was my journey towards developing quality friends. And we can talk about careers, we can talk about, marriage and family. And I mean, there was all those topics, which, well, there's something to say about those, but just to talk about friendship, it's like when I was, a young child and a teen, I loved people. I loved the friends that I had, but I found that the friends that I had the insight back then, even as a young person, as a teen, etc. That and even early adulthood, I saw my friends as these are inadequate friends. These are not the type of friends I want. Better friends. I want closer friends, and not that they were bad people per se, but we didn't know what the heck we were doing. We were like 18-year-olds, right? Like I didn't know how to be a good friend too, right? But I knew, I don't know if I could use the word intuitively. I knew that there was out there a possibility of depth and closeness and connection. And then I found it a little bit as I went into college dorms in my early 20s. But even that, I think, wasn't quite the degree of connection that I still thirsted for. That only now in the last, I would say, probably a couple of years have I really found people that I can just be super open, and there's non-judgmentalism. There's all the good things that you guys all, and not just you guys, but the extended group as well, most of whom you all know and love, I might add. And so, yeah, my journey from a young person was like, I wanna build a community. I want people. I want wonderful people in my life, and I still feel, while I do have amazing people in my life now, of course, present company included, I still see that the future trajectory is going to be even greater. And we've talked about things like, co-housing and various community initiatives, etc. And I don't know exactly what that will look like, but I do believe that I'm on sort of the similar journey, just a different part of the journey, as I started wanting and craving from when I was a kid.
I'm just hearing one word as you're talking there, Joshua, and that was idealist. I'm not the only one. That's awesome. That's beautiful. I love it. I love it. Okay, there's some things I was pulling out from there just to keep coming back to you. But let me give the other gentleman a chance to chime in.
I'll go. My life has changed so many times. Any course that I try to set usually just goes a different way, but in a good way. So I've tried to kind of find this balance between going with the flow, but then also trying to find the perfect mountain peak that I want to get to at some point in time in my life. So, but
Did
then
you just
when
use the word mountain peak, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Even though that was like instrumental in a significant life change for you?
Exactly.
Nicely
I did
done.
not I did not plan on that happening. So I've been on many, many different journeys in my life, and all of them have not ended up in the way that I thought they would. And most of them I've just totally been derailed from. And then other opportunities have come into my life where I didn't seek them out and I didn't plan for them. And then ended up being much more integral in my life than I would have expected, even a few years ago. So,
And just
that's
for our
where
listeners, the mountaintop experience that Jonathan had, some would say a mountaintop experience is something like huge epiphany, like a aha moment, and it's maybe seen by some as an all-time high, and yet in Jonathan's case, it was like an all-time low because he plummeted from
it's not an all-time low. It was an all-time high. It was absolutely an all-time high.
I'm speaking literally. It was an all-time low as he
Okay.
tumbled down the mountain. And still has come out on an amazing different peak, because the way you see the world despite such a life change, I've never seen that kind of before. So yeah, that's significant, Jonathan. Good point though. It was a low of sorts, but how many feet did you fall, Jonathan? Was it like?
Well, I fell 15 feet initially and then slowed that with my head. And then I tumbled another 70, 80 feet, tumbles, slid. Yeah. All the fun stuff.
Great.
And has the pictures of his brain to prove it. Open access to your brain. My goodness, who has that?
Yeah. And survived surgery in a third world country.
Great input there, Jonathan. Frank,
anyway, moving on.
Yeah, Frank, Roger, do you guys want to chime in?
I'll go ahead since Frank's working his tech, I can see. I'm a planner and I'm a type A personality on top of being an introvert, a fluid introvert extrovert. And I got to tell you, man, I spent too much of my life planning and being streamlined and being structured. And a lot of the plans that I had in line and envisioned never all materialized the way I saw it. And I echo what Jonathan just said, that things came to me unexpected that really brought so much value and significance in my life. But what I am now trying to do is to create a balance. Primarily my roles, my past has been looking and planning and streamlining around career, parenthood. Parenthood just threw me to the loop because it came out, it ended up being what the kid ended up being that dictated how I ended up being. So that came out of the loop. Then the job did its own thing similarly. And then I kind of now more focused on the stuff that we're doing here, friendships and relationships, being more intentional around friendships and relationships, being more intentional around the types of people that I invest those levels of intention around, under the backdrop or under the umbrella of bringing my whole self, bringing my full self and being authentic, which is something I've never always done. I've always been a masterful code switcher and navigating cultural and professional and social contexts and separating the different selves of me from one to the other. But now in our Friendology group and in our larger group at a great extent, I'm really being more intentional. And I don't want to say planning, but it does kind of fit under planning. I'll be more intentional about my associations, and not just for today, but thinking of them in terms of long term. I want, life happens and we are going to end up doing things or away from each other, but making the relationships and our friendships so intentional that even if there's a break in time of a month or 6 months or a year, when you come back together, you've built the framework for something long lasting.
Really cool. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, got my microphone on. Yeah, this whole sort of pathway. I mean, you certainly have all these sort of things like around family and career and all that stuff, and that's one thing. But I mean, certainly in terms of friendship, when I think about where I was, 10, 20, 30 years ago, I don't think even now, like I've never had sort of like this is where I'm at now and this is where I want to be. I've never really thought about it that way. But what I have done is more sort of like internal kind of mindset work in terms of being like, well, you know, what kind of just noticing like how I feel after, you know, certain interactions or you know, as I start to meet people and just kind of trying to have a more open dialogue with myself about, you know, like what kinds of things am I going to get? What kind of value am I going to get out of, you know, for myself out of these relationships? And what kind of things can I give back? And, you know, is this sort of, you know, and kind of follow not necessarily a trajectory, but just kind of go with the flow, but in a much more open and risk-taking way that maybe I wouldn't have been as open to in the past. And I think that that's leading me in the right direction. And just kind of being more like living in the present, and kind of approaching friendships that way, and trying to be a bit less analytical about everything. And I feel that that's been healthier for me.
Really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was listening to you guys, I was writing some notes here down. What would you say has been the biggest change in your perspective in life in general that you don't hold to anymore? What is that one thing that you're like, I once used to think this is really important or really significant, and I kind of planned a lot based on this point right here, but now is not necessarily so high in its ranking, or may not even exist at all because you have shifted in a significant way?
I would go first on that one, in just the sense that I think I had a much more prescriptive view of friendship when I was younger. You know, I'm much more like, it kind of follows this formula. And I think that, you know, maybe you watch TV shows and movies and stuff, and you kind of get this sense of, you know, like, this is what a best friend is and that kind of thing. Whereas now my perspective is much more laissez-faire in terms of, you know, kind of, you know, not necessarily trying to pigeonhole everyone into a specific, you know, list of attributes or goals in terms of, you know, like how I want things to go. Because I think that those things, for me at least, they tend to develop much healthier when it's left to develop organically.
I'll go next. I'll say that mine is a two-part response. That first, a lot of what I would be directed towards would be financial and professional focuses in life, which also included the kinds of friends I associated with in the past, pivoting around that. And now where the shift that I've taken and the change that I've taken is to remove myself away from that and look at friendships and relationships that are less around a financial premise or a professional premise, and more so on what the heart feels and what the person brings. And you know, particularly also when someone is completely different from me, and not always want to aspire to a friendship where it's sort of a mirror image of the things that I am or the things that I've thought. I've found such relief or satisfaction now and recently in redirecting my whole self, where I'm completely open to all kinds of things and opposite things, and the value add from getting to know someone who doesn't necessarily pivot from a financial or career trajectory.
Has that been a scary transition for you, Roger?
I wouldn't say scary, but my muscle memory around it has had to be adjusted because it's all I've ever done initially in my early years. But then learning lessons and having fallen a few times in career, in finances, and in relationships. At the end of the day, I started to realize what would be more a priority for me. And so it's more about shifting my muscle memory and my internal alignment away from what I'd always been doing. It's change management, internal change management, pretty much.
I think mine is similar to yours, Frank. Frank, you were mentioning something about not being so prescriptive in the way you see friendships formulating. I would say mine was a radical shift just in black. I used to see the world in black and white. And that was driven again because of my idealism of how things ought to be based on what I was learning. And coming especially from a religious community, there was a right way, there's a wrong way. There's a way that fit within the mold, and there's a way that was outside of that mold that was strongly discouraged. So coming to experience perspectives, I remember, for example, when someone very close to me one time in my teen years, someone really close, they came down with alcohol poisoning because they'd been at some party. And so I remember being in the hospital with them and just seeing their body, under the warm blanket that they'd put, and I was just visibly shaken, and so at that point I swore off alcohol as absolutely evil, totally evil at all costs kind of thing. And it wasn't until I started my years planting trees that I started to have that perspective challenged, right, by seeing others who would drink alcohol responsibly. And so that started shifting a little bit over. It's incidents like that, scenarios like that started challenging my perspective that the world that I'm encountering is not necessarily black and white, as opposed to there's actually a lot of gray in between. And so I'd call the theme of my life, growing up into adulthood, which is still in process, coming to a familiarization with accommodating the gray in life. And I think that has really been impacting for me personally, because it gives me a little bit more access to those perspectives, Roger, that are different from mine, to be able to hear and try to understand from some other perspective that even I may not agree with or hold afterwards, but at least to still accommodate and say, okay, I see the validity of that perspective as it is there, So that's probably one of my biggest ones that I was like, oh, that's a huge, significant shift. I see your gears turning there, Roger. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to memorialize this moment. I want to memorialize this moment of something that you said. Hang on, we're not going to talk about it now, but you said, and I applaud you, that you recognize that there's a lot of gray in life, or a lot of in between, a lot of ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
In other conversations, I'm going to refer back to this,
okay,
because it resonates for me in a lot of different ways. And it's a construct for me of change management. It's a construct of shifting idealisms.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like that you said that. I applaud that you said that. And it's within this context of this discussion. Remember this moment. We'll positively re-reference it in other situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jonathan, Joshua, you guys want to chime in there?
Yeah. I think I used to be a lot more stubborn around people not getting certain ideas, certain concepts, certain ways of being around other people, in terms of like empathy and, yeah. The weird one, the really weird one was for me that I felt like other people weren't being as empathetic as they could be. But meanwhile, that was me being not empathetic towards where they were in their life. So one thing that I've really shifted within myself, and very, very consciously, is to stop myself whenever one of those judgmental thoughts comes up, and say, okay, if I were in this person's shoes, and it like exactly the same shoes from birth onwards, I would probably be feeling and thinking and doing the exact same things as this person. And so that's one shift that I've had, that's been very significant. And then other than that, I don't think there's really, everything else has been just very little tweaks here and there on how I view the world, but that's the big one.
This morning when I was at the garage, Jonathan, I eventually it was a half a day spent there while they're doing their thing. Oh, half a day. Here's what happened though. the lady that was helping me, through the service bay there, she was really curt from the very moment I started interacting with her, really curt. And that just carried on throughout our interactions through that morning into the afternoon. And even in the aftermath, at one point I just had to pause her and say, listen, is there some way I offended you? Because I'm not seeing why you're being so curt with me. So she just gave the brief response of, it's just been a rough day and that kind of thing here at work. And so in the aftermath, I thought maybe I should have suggested, it still doesn't give you a legitimacy to treat people like dirt. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Why I bring up that experience is because once upon a time, I would have been a lot more devastated, a lot more hurt, a lot more discouraged, depressed about that experience. Today, I'm not going to lie to you, given all my acumen in knowing how to socially interact with people and let things fall off my back like water on a duck's back, that was not doing, in the aftermath, I was still feeling it for a couple of hours, trying to remind myself again of those lessons of, okay, once upon a time I used to be over here and I'm here in this moment right now, I'm still feeling the effects of that interaction. It still took a little while for me to talk to myself, to reaffirm what I needed to remember as far as, let's just take her at her word. It was a rough day for her. Maybe this isn't how she always is, or regardless, there's things beyond my control there, beyond my awareness, beyond my comprehensive knowledge. How can I give space for that and be able to still address what I need to be able to move on, kind of thing. And so I was remembering that when you were just sharing what you were sharing there, Jonathan.
Yeah, it's a very, very good, firsthand relevant experience that you just shared.
Joshua, we're talking about the biggest change in our perspective, seeing life, relationships, trajectory that you've gone through that you may not hold anymore. What's that for you?
A lot of the things that you guys have said, I would echo. I guess I'm trying to think. I've been trying to think of a good one, but there's a few. I mean, I used to be a people pleaser, and that's a term that's very common, as I'm sure you all have heard it several times.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. And I think that I'm far less of that. I mean, I like everybody wants to be liked and admired, of course. That's natural and healthy, I think, to a degree. And then the correlated, I guess, mind reading is what I'll use that term, where someone does something or says something, or in many cases doesn't do something, and then I make the assumption, I jump to the conclusion that they don't respect me, or they dislike me, or whatever it is, right? And I've learned as I've gotten to know people more and more and getting into who they are, that's rarely the case. That I was right in those assumptions. Sort of kind of similar to your example, Vinyam, actually. And that I have, I think, grown in I'll use this term, gracious assumptions.
I like that.
Everyone's struggling, and everyone makes mistakes, and it's not to justify their mistakes or anything like that, but I don't have to take it personally. And I don't have to also take it as a global. They make one thing, therefore they're always this thing. They say they lied once, that means they're a liar, and they will always lie. Well, no, not necessarily. So yeah, and there's probably a whole lot of other nuances that different, grays. The topic of grays has been huge, but that topic goes into so many other topics beyond friendship learning, just life in general, topics, expertise, etc.
Joshua, as you were talking earlier about just some of the things that you really value now, like you've one of the areas you were mentioning is you have developed a way of finding quality connections in your friendships, right? And that continues. It almost sounded like you were insatiable as you were talking about the insights into what to look for. There was a hunger for depth that you're referencing there. The question that made me think about for all of us here is, that's a really optimistic, uptrending sort of an outlook, like I am just so full of life. I continue. Has that been the experience of all of us? Or for some of us, has it been more of a challenge by way of when we look into the future, or when we're planning for the future as we're going through life, it has been more bleak perhaps, or even a downward turn? How have we seen those seasons? Yeah. A roller coaster. Yeah. Like for the most part, when you're looking at your experience thus far, and even banking on the future, like planning for the future based on the past, what has that been like for you gentlemen?
I've definitely experienced my share of roller coasters around friendship. We referenced my tumble down the mountain a few years ago. And after that happened, there were far fewer friends that reached out and offered any kind of help at that point in time. So that was definitely a learning opportunity for me. And I just kind of took it in stride and just kept focusing on what I needed to focus on, which was rehabilitating my body to do what I wanted it to do. And then just a couple of other moments like that where people, I thought we were going towards a certain direction in our friendship, but then ended up not seeing eye to eye and just had to let those go. I think you guys have probably picked up over the various conversations that I take a lot of things just kind of in stride, and I just keep going with the flow and moving along. And I know that not everyone sees life in that kind of way, but that's just been my experience with things that have happened that have not been optimistic, or the most opportune or optimistic kind of situations. And so, yeah. Did that make sense? All right.
I can summarize: happy-go-lucky, right?
No, it's not really happy-go-lucky. It's more just like, yeah, well, that happened. Moving on. So happy-go-lucky, I feel, is more of like an ignorant kind of attitude, versus for myself, I feel like I look at the bigger picture and I go, okay, it is what it is. I'll keep moving on. And I know that there is an abundance of whatever I want out there for myself, be it friendship, be it resources in any way, be it, food. Yeah. There's always enough to go around. Yeah.
Cool. I hear you.
I would say in my answer to your question, Binyam, that it sort of goes back to this idea. Like for me, I definitely, it's been much more steady upward trajectory in terms of my personal well-being and how I feel about my friendships in the last maybe 2-3 years. And I feel that that's closely tied to sort of some of the points that have been floating around in the terms of just because maybe someone reacts a certain way, that, maybe I've spent less time making that about me and taking a step back and realizing that, okay, well, that person probably has a lot of other things going on, and that maybe I'm not responsible, and that maybe they have a negative reaction for whatever reason towards me, but it might not be about me. And taking the time to realize that, and that maybe they come around the next time, and turns out that when you get the full story, that Maybe you can have that dialogue, maybe you don't, but then it kind of, weighs you down less and kind of prevents you from getting in your own way in terms of overanalyzing that friendship. And then also just sort of like kind of getting rid of that formula piece in terms of how a friendship should go. And that then, because I think that formula then brings in expectations or, assumptions about, well, we're at this level, like at least I thought so, but maybe that person didn't perceive it that way. And so then when you kind of, I don't know, this is why I'm kind of heading in more in this direction of being more present rather than retrospective or having anxiety about what the future looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe, some of those expectations, if I'm really down and I need help, I feel like I can reach out, but not necessarily everyone's going to be available, right? Sure, they might be, but if they're not, then, this probably has less to do with them having a bone to pick with me and more to do with whatever's going on in their lives. And so, yeah, I mean, kind of letting go of some of those things, I think definitely sends it in a more like upward trajectory in terms of the various connections that I'm developing.
I could tell Roger was really eating up what you were saying there. Roger, piggyback on Frank's there.
No, I Frank, thank you for sharing that, because that's something that I've had to learn.
Me too.
And incorporate in my life. I unfortunately was one of those persons who always thought the issue was about me. And sometimes, as you're saying, has nothing to do with us or the other, it's all about the individual's experiences and what they're dealing with, and learning to sort of do that. I still fall back into my old ways sometimes, but for the greater time, I've learned what you've just shared, and I'm trying to incorporate it as the full presence of myself at all times. Were you always that way, Ari Frank, or is that a new development?
No, this is a new philosophy for me. And, definitely, people you consider friends can do and say hurtful things, and those hurt. Absolutely. But yeah, I'm definitely trying to kind of let go of some of those, and kind of analyze a little bit more about like, where do those emotions come from, and what's really at the heart of the matter in terms of why that interaction took place. And that maybe it's not kind of, the negative place where my mind goes. But that's taken a lot of work on my end in terms of, trying to, figure out how I want to approach life and friendship and community going forward.
Even in ghosting, I've been ghosted in friendship and all kinds of relationships. And you that resonates for you? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And even for me, I've had to take what you've just described and apply it to my experience of being ghosted. And at the same time, try not to be the one who's the ghoster. But then sometimes you'll come across an individual where it's totally off balance, and then you may have to do the ghosting. So it's complicated, but yeah, in that sense, in ghosting, I've applied.
Yeah, I've kind of gone both ways, and sometimes it's sort of like, yeah, you need to. Sometimes you encounter someone. I mean, I'm not gonna. I'm not really the most sage advice kind of person on this topic, but sometimes you need to cut someone out of your life, and that's a hard decision you have to make. Yeah. But it'd be more healthy if you could have dialogue with them about why. I don't know what the best approach is for that, but certainly, I don't know. It's kind of made it a lot easier for me when I've kind of tried to let go of a lot of expectation. And I don't know if that's maybe more an avoidant kind of attachment pattern or what if there's a better approach, but I'm definitely open to discussion and hearing what everyone else thinks.
Jonathan, you were really resonating with Frank there as well when he was saying sometimes you just have to cut someone away. That sounds really harsh, but why were you so enthusiastic in your response there.
Oh, because I've done so.
Yeah.
I have actually broken off a friendship because they were just very draining, and it seemed very one-sided. At one point in time, after quite a long time of thinking about this, and like finally came to a decision of just, nope, I can't do it. So I called this person up and I said, hey, this is where I'm at. This is my thought pattern. And because of that, I'm afraid I can't be your friend anymore. I'm sorry, wish you the best, and they just said, okay, thanks for the call. And that was it. And we haven't seen each other since. And that was probably one of the best decisions in regards to that friendship. Is just, okay, well, it just needed to stop, and I stopped it.
And additionally, now we do have our resident psychologist. So I'll also get his input on this one here, Joshua. But I think we're wired in a social climate in which such cutting people off is discouraged because it's a mean thing to do, right? And so a lot of people, I may argue, stay in unhealthy and very damaging connections in these pathways that they're on in life because of that sense of being compelled to, by obligation, carry on and kind of put up with it, right? And so go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, I was just going to say that the reason that I did that is because I'd rather do that than ghost somebody.
Sure.
That way there's not a question mark hanging out over the relationship. Yeah. And it's like, okay, this is done. Sure. These are the reasons, no question marks.
And I dare say that's an ideal way to go about it, right, Jonathan? Especially if you have that ability to have those conversations, to be strong in the way you're presenting yourself and saying, here, I'm very principled, following through because of X, Y, and Z factor, right? I know in my currently as I am right now, how I've evolved as an individual, I'm okay with those moments of conflict, those moments of engagement, which may not be comfortable. Once upon a time, I was not. I was avoiding conflict at all costs. And I'd just kind of do the ghosting. I would just kind of melt away. I'd kind of just recede over time and then all of a sudden not be there anymore. So I also value now being able to have that face-to-face, but that's because I've had to work at it over time to have those conversations, to have a strong resolve inside, to have a very clear mind when I'm having those conversations to say, this is why this is not working anymore and why I have to go in a separate pathway. But even for those who are listening, I would probably, from my vantage point, encourage, if you don't have access to that, if that thought of having those conversations it melts you because you just can't handle that. I would say still look after your health and do what you need, and there wouldn't be any judgment from me per se.
Another point.
Go ahead, Joshua.
There are times when the person receiving that, they're not safe. They're not a safe person to receive the official cutting off. And so in those cases, sometimes ghosting or letting it drift is the more appropriate response. And hopefully that's a genuine assessment that they're not safe to, rather than a cop-out. That I just don't feel like it. It's a hard thing to do, so I'm just going to avoid hard things to do. But yeah, so finding that balance is important. Now, as you're discussing this, I'm thinking in my mind, I'm kind of lamenting a little bit, because while I recognize and understand that there's a reality that connections have to be severed, they have to be cut off at times. I think, and I'm just thinking out loud here, I think that we as a society do that too much. As a Western culture, we don't value loyalty like our ancestors did. And I think that it's unfortunate. I think there are times when we are psychologically so immature that we just cannot handle what appears to be a relationship with toxic components. But I have been in several connections where there are toxic components, or there are aspects of that connection that are not good or not healthy, but I stay connected in some way, shape, or form. I may take an arm's length, away from that person. I'm not going to keep them in my inner circle, but still I see that person as, okay, well, I may not be gaining something from them, but the history and the loyalty and the longevity, and maybe there's family involved in many cases, right? I guess we're kind of extending this conversation of friends into family here, but or just interconnections of similar people, etc. That I think there's often something to be salvaged if we can really work on this. That being said, I get it. There are times when it is, you're not in a situation, perhaps you're vulnerable, you're struggling, and maybe it's for a time you need to cut that person off. Maybe it's for a time while you're growing, I don't know. Or just in general, that person is just so beyond redemption toxic that that you have to do it. So I will concede that there are those times, but I feel like sometimes our society has a very contractual view of friendships, and that's kind of unfortunate, and it's causing a lot of these connections to be cut off, because it's like an employee. If that employee is not performing, what do? You let them go. Why? Because you need your company to be afloat, right? Well, and that's all well and good in a company type of interaction, but in a friendship interaction, well, I believe it ought to be a bit different than that. It ought to be a little bit more strong, a little bit more longevity focused, a little bit more grace focused, a little bit more focused on the fact that there will be imbalances. For example, it is what it is. It's, anyways, thoughts on that?
I agree.
I have just, sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
Oh no,
I was just wondering,
yeah.
what are some just picking Joshua's brains here, what are some
I like how you
strategies?
said that in plural. Joshua's brains, plural.
Joshua's brains, both
The
hemispheres.
other ones.
Okay, carry on.
What would be some strategies to kind of approach what you might perceive as a toxic relationship with a friend, and how would you kind of, I don't know, how do you handle some of those situations? Maybe, I don't know that everyone is capable of maintaining some connection, but yeah, I don't know, what would be sort of like the healthiest way to tackle some of these issues?
It's a good question. Depends on the person, depends on the issue that you have. I mean, one way is to keep them, as I was mentioning, at arm's length, and not allow them into your, for example, vulnerable things. If I'm going through some vulnerable struggles, maybe that's not going to be the friend that I'm going to debrief with, right? Maybe I'll debrief with Frank instead, and Benjamin, etc.
Right.
The other thing is, can we categorize? Can we be like, I really don't like this guy over here because of this aspect of his life, but I really like this part. So maybe I'm just gonna interact with him on this topic, for example. Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. So, say someone has really messed up views and they go on this crazy tirade about anti-government or whatever it is, right? And it really just bothers you. Well, then just don't talk about that when you're around them. That's an option. But then obviously, if it is something between the two of you, something about how they're speaking with you, how they're interacting with you, that needs to be a boundary that has to be set, then yeah, just having that conversation with tact. And if you do that, I think the more specific examples that you can give, the better. So for example, if you come to somebody with an issue, a beef you have with them, whatever that is, and it's just sort of this vague description of it, they're going to be like, I don't understand how that's an issue. But if you come to them with here's, when you said this at this time, this is how I interpreted this, and own your part of it, then that person will usually be far more likely to receive that. But again, more likely, not perfectly likely. There are going to always be situations where, again, when that person is, I would call them unsafe. You can't even tell them about how you're feeling some of the doubts that you have with regards to your interactions. If you can't even do that without them just blowing up or blaming you or whatever, then that's a whole nother story, right? In those cases, you either have to cut off a part of them, or or in some cases cutting them all off completely. One example comes to my mind actually. Say you have a friend who has stolen something from you in your house. Like, that's a kind of a toxic thing to do, right? Who wants a friend that steals, or some other things that's destructive in your space? Well, maybe a boundary you could set is, okay, well, again, keep them at arm's length. They probably aren't the best friend in the world, but maybe you'll hang out with them somewhere else, not at your house. Do you know what I mean? So you could set that boundary and keep maybe some semblance of that connection, because maybe there is something still good in that connection. Or again, history, you've known each other for 20 years, whatever it is, right?
Right.
What are your thoughts on that, guys?
I know in this group of friends here, my MO, you guys probably know, is more invasive to just go and talk to you guys and say, hey, this is what I'm observing. Let's talk about this. And so it's nice getting to that level of being able to address one another, knowing that it's not out of the intention of ripping each other apart, but more so by way of saying, I care about what we are building, and I care about the things that happen in the midst of what we're building. And when I'm observing this or seeing this or hearing about this, let's watch each other's back. But perhaps that's a point in which we strive in the midst of opportunities to connect, to get to that point, right? To be able to have those frank conversations. Sorry, Frank, I just used that word, those frank conversations. Oh my goodness. Hey, as we are kind of winding down in our time here, let me just throw out a net of sorts on just a couple other points I wanted to hear you guys' thoughts on. I wanted to hear you guys' thoughts on the following, because one is change. How good are you guys with change, especially in life and perspectives and unknowns and those kind of things? Because I think that's part of this conversation as we're talking about discovering what's that evolution in our path in life looks like. Well, how does change play for you? Do you love it? Do you resonate with it? Or do you sort of avoid it like the plague, even as you endure it when it happens, which is always? Secondly, the interweaving of independence versus dependence in the way we connect with each other. So the picture I had here was a weaving of sorts, a beautiful tapestry as our lines intersect with each other in life. We are spending time, like even this podcast, for example. You guys are taking time out of your week to make this happen. We're taking time out to try and spend with each other on the phone. When we get together as well, we're interweaving. But how do we think about, as our path in life evolves, the independent component where we are learning to sort of keep that a healthy sort of not relying on someone else, versus the dependent part where we're saying being in community does play into that. And then the third and final thing I wanted to hear from you on was, what are some non-negotiables that you are holding onto tenaciously as you go forward in the future here? That you're like, this is something I just can't give up here. This is so important for me. So let me just throw that out there, and you guys just chime in on any or all of those points as you're resonating with them.
Well, you're going to have to remind me at least of the 3 points, because
that's
they're
okay.
Each one's substantial.
Well. I know.
But the easiest one for me to answer is the first one, because it's the epitome of my identity. Fortunately, I am able to say that I'm very good with change. And both my professional fields, I have 2 professional fields, and both of them fundamentally pivot off of change and change management. It's all I do. So I live that every day, and figuring out how to foster change is my challenge. Being the change agent and living the change is easier for me. What's hard is trying to teach the people around me in both my professional sectors how to be less resistant to change. That's fundamentally my job. Though I'm in technology and sociology, schmectology and sociology, right? It's all about trying to get people to accept resistance to change. So yeah, I'll let someone else respond to the first one.
As you guys might have guessed, I am quite good with change. Obviously, larger changes will, kind of knock me off my even keel for a little bit, but for the most part, I'm pretty good with it. And actually, Roger, you had mentioned how you're trying to help your coworkers and various people in your life become better with change. That's actually one place where I really want to grow as well, is to let people be okay with not being okay with change. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a good little reminder to myself for, all right, I want to work on that.
I know for me, I am not good at change at all. Oh my goodness, I struggle. I fight change. Here's the thing. I've moved for so many times in my life. My path in life seems to have been all over the place as I move from this place and have to reestablish new roots and friendships and connections, and then see those break again as I move on to the next one. And a lot of that change has been beyond my control because I'm just kind of moving along with mom and dad, and then even after I move away from home, circumstances with me being in school and the transiency of student life as I have to go from place to place, to fulfill my academic career. And then in my career, as it takes off, and then as different life circumstances come in again, I have just grown to have a strong distaste for change. And so I find myself constantly fighting change and trying to keep some state of homeostasis where I can just say, here's a level playing field that I can just start building on. And so in the midst of all that fighting, change doesn't care about how I feel. It just continues to implement its effects. And I think currently, even though I'm still averse to change, I'm a lot more accommodating for its existence, knowing that it's just around the corner in some unknown way. This morning, for example, my schedule was changed in a radical way. I've planned, in this time of the month, and yet change. So it's a tempestuous relationship I carry on with change.
I find change it's an area of growth for me. I think it's stressful, but I know I'm good at it. It's just the process itself, moving to a new home before it feels like home, changing jobs, very stressful, having to learn what's expected of you, having to learn new things, having to break your routines, change with respect to bringing new people into your life. How do those people fit into your life? What kind of, do you put them in sort of a compartment of like, this is what I do with that person? Or do you incorporate them into other things as well? How do you make space for them in your week? That kind of stuff. It's exciting to meet new people, but for me, it's definitely an area of growth. But I know I can do it, and it's definitely part of my new kind of philosophy would be to definitely be more open to change, and I feel like it's heading me in a healthier direction. I can't remember what the other questions were, but
that's okay. The other two questions quickly were the independent versus the dependent sort of balance in the way that we connect with each other, and still, so how do we connect and learn to depend in appropriate ways in friendship as we go through life, and still also maintain our independence as far as things we're responsible for and things that we want to continue to keep ourselves still, instead of like losing our identity in someone else.
I think this actually that and you also said about the non-negotiables, and I think for me it's the same thing. It's boundaries. So how do you where do you draw the line in terms of this is the boundary I set for me. This is where I stay independent, and this is an area where maybe I'm more dependent on others to fulfill X, Y, or Z needs. Whether that's I need help moving a couch, or whether I need help talking things through, or whether I need help processing something.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're waiting on Joshua.
What I mean, I have no comments on this.
That's all right. Let me chime in here with this one here. I like what you're saying about boundaries, Frank, and I was thinking about my evolution over time to being able to give myself permission to have boundaries. Once upon a time when I didn't think I had access to boundaries because I was on everyone else's schedule and I felt obligated to fulfill other people's schedules because I was so bound by that acceptance factor, it was a revolutionary thing for me. It was in essence a way of me saying, here's how I can learn to love myself first and to be able to draw those lines and still be able to connect with others around me in a respectful way, even if the answer might be no to them, even if that is the outcome there. And so that was a really critical one. And so that independence versus dependence piece on me, for me, has been a similar journey. And then it makes me think, Frank, as well about, for you and I, we're in a later season in life, right? We're in a mid to later season. Okay. I'm thinking, especially in reference to who our listeners may be, especially if they're younger. But the point I'm trying to make is, it's a beautiful thing to me when I see young people who've learned how to draw boundaries appropriately. A beautiful thing for me because I don't know what that's like to be at that young stage and to be able to engage in a grown-up world with a reference, first of all, from your center outward instead of from outward in, right? And so I'm often like really intrigued and inspired when I see young people who are able to establish that. But then the other question I was thinking, though, is that seems to be rare when I see those young individuals who have this growth, this intuitive ability to be able to make those standards. For the most part, I think most share the same experience as I, who kind of struggle to find what that looks like, right? And it causes me to wonder what could it be when we're describing the importance of keeping this in view in your connections and relationships, where on the one hand you're saying, what does it mean for me to be complete in myself with reference to how I see myself? I just made a video on my platform, on my TikTok platform yesterday, and I wanted to make a point. So my rating on my Uber has finally risen up to a really, really good number, right? And I've never been concerned about it because I know I'm not always a fit for everyone. And I'm okay with that. I'm always going to give everyone the same level of respect and attention and detail to service that I can, but it's not always going to be received. And sometimes I get like poor ratings that brings down my mark. Once upon a time, my sense of self-worth would have just spiraled downhill because I'd be like, I'm devastated by that one, but now when I don't have any low ratings anymore because it kind of cycles through the 500 at a time and it's really stellar right now. I made a post about it saying, this is not in essence to show off, but this is for me to make a point. One, I want to acknowledge that this is a really good thing. I'm happy about this. But second, my worth does not revolve around this accomplishment, because when I'm doing good or when I'm not doing so great, I'm already okay with myself as an individual. I've learned to diverge or bring a distance between my accomplishments or lack thereof and my person as I am. And so even in the context of my connections and friendships, what does it look like for me to be able to, one, appreciate those friendships, especially when we get involved in life, when we learn to depend on each other, when I can call you guys and say, hey, I'm doing really terrible right now. I know, Josh, I really appreciate you for doing this. When you're calling me and saying, Binyam, we need to talk. I need to offload. I need to, I appreciate those. So that for me is an expression of appropriate dependence, right? But then also the other side for me is how to also know that my worth does not revolve on what others say about me or feel about me or think about me. How can I keep independence to say, when I look in the mirror, am I satisfied with me? How can I continue to invest in myself so that I am growing in that sense of self-confidence that, for example, here's the thing, I'm loving what we're building here by way of friendship. And I like what you're saying earlier, Joshua, when you said this is like, how can we plan for the long run instead of just short term, the way our culture sort of exhibits in these connections right now, I plan my connections for the long term. And yet, even as I do so, as I plan my future pathway in my friendships with you guys, for example, I'm also making space that it may not happen. At some point, there may come a point where we come to a budding of perspectives and say, maybe this is the part where we move on, you know, and how can we do that still with integrity? That's my thing, you know? And so it's not like I'm planning for devastation and the worst case scenario, but still having in view my boundaries, like you're mentioning, Frank, honoring those boundaries, even as I continue to build friendships, and then also learning what it looks like when I have to walk a different path, for example, even if it's just in perspective. That's part of my thought process in relation to independence versus dependence. And I had to grow into that. I didn't have that from a young age.
I wouldn't necessarily sell yourself short on that one. Personally, I think my personal view on this is that I don't know that necessarily young people with healthy boundaries necessarily have that intuitive ability, that maybe they've had, I don't know, different family coaching or different role models where maybe they picked up on this behavior and just from the context of the way they were raised. I know that definitely there is that intuitive piece, but I wonder if it isn't just necessarily a natural talent that people are born with. But it does make me wonder, how much value would there be in I don't know, having more education around some of these areas, and that people could have kind of because it's not necessarily super straightforward about how to manage relationships, how to manage friendships. It's not necessarily cut and dried formula, right? Because we pick up things from all kinds of different places as we grow up, and not necessarily the healthiest ones.
True.
But yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, and it took me a long time to learn kind of how to manage these areas.
Roger, Jonathan, Joshua, any last thoughts before I land the plane? Yeah. Sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
It's okay. Joshua.
What? Oh, I was just going to say we're all interdependent. And just this concept of dependence versus independence is an interesting one as it relates to friendship, but as it relates to so many other things, relationships, jobs, day-to-day functioning like cooking and mowing the lawn, and so many different topics. That could be a whole other podcast just on that topic. And I think we are guided towards one end of the pendulum swing, often from our psychological experiences. We want to be more independent, or we want to be more dependent. And I think the healthy is to try to find that healthy middle. But again, depends on the domain, etc. Like when Jonathan was in the hospital in a third world country, he was highly dependent, and that was probably a good thing because you needed to be in that moment. But anyways.
Oh yes, very, very much so. You guys have summed this up, very well. I don't feel like there's anything that I could add at this point.
The only thing I'll add is something I'll state in the spirit of authenticity as I reflected on everything and the words I said, is that on the topic of change, as much as I'm a free-flowing agent around change, it still scares the bleep, 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 bleep out of me. And it still makes me bleep, 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 bleep nervous. You know what I mean? Change is hard, but I guess it's how we adapt to it is on a spectrum, or how we adjust to it is on a spectrum as well. So I want to just make sure I give that distinction, because it's not necessarily a walk in the park for me, though it might be a little bit more comfortable for me than it is for you, Binyam. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Awesome. Listen, it has been such a blast again with you guys, exploring this avenue of where we've been, some of our experiences along the way. hoping that even our listeners, as they were listening in, could put themselves into our stories in some way to resonate in some sense of what change shifts look like as we connect with each other. This is Jonathan, Frank, Joshua, Roger, and I, Binyam, joining you tonight, hoping to put a picture of what could be. Thanks for joining us on Friendology.
Are we stopping recording now?
Fantastic.
Yay.